ready to plant in another 2 days?" he said, hoping to change the subject. 2 days? Griff exclaimed. 2 days, grubbing and hacking and hoeing. If we had a donkey and a plough, we'd get it done in half the time." "We don't have either," Owen said in a reasonable tone. But Griff wasn't to be diverted from his litany of complaints. "David Ap Davis has both. He could lend them to us." David Ap Davis was another farmer in Podranyith, but he had 3 fields, all on better, more fertile ground than the single rocky plot that the Ap Jones brothers worked. As a result, his crops were larger, and he could afford to sell some of his extra produce to the miners in the village. "He'd charge us for them," Di put in gloomily. Griff's anger flared once again. "Aye, that he would, and at a crippling price. He'd never think of lending them to help us." "Why should he?" Owen said. "A mule only has so many hours of work in its life, and chances are our rocky ground would damage the plough. He'd have every right to charge us." There was no real answer to that, Griff knew, but his brother's stolid acceptance of the life they shared continued to annoy him. He glared at the rocky ground as they trudged away from the half-prepared field toward the village. It was a 2-kilometre walk, and mostly uphill. Their elongated shadows preceded them, rippling strangely over the uneven ground. Owen sighed, glad that Griff's complaining had finally died away. It was the same every day. His brother would continue to complain about their lot until he came to realise that complaining would never change it. It was their fate to labour in the rocky earth, hacking and ripping at it with their inefficient tools, planting a new crop each season, and subsisting on what they could grow. They had the field and 3 goats, who provided them with enough milk for their cheese, and a little extra to trade for flour. In addition, their mother kept 6 hens, who gave them a meagre supply of eggs, and on rare occasions, a bird to roast or boil. And that was life for a farmer in Podranyith. An unvarying, repetitive pattern of exhausting work, constant nagging hunger, boredom, and weariness. There was little joy in it, but it was what it was. And Owen knew there were others who were in even harder straits than the Ap Joneses. Eventually, he thought, Griff would come to realise it and accept it. They crested a hill on the path. On one side of the narrow road, the ground fell away in a steep, shale-covered slope into a valley. On the other, the cliffs rose sheer and bleak. In the distance, a kilometre away, they could see the grey huddle of houses that made up Podranyith. There were a score of them, all similarly built from stone and weathered timber, with dried mud sealing the gaps between the uneven surfaces. The shallow pitched roofs were covered in split stone shingles, and smoke rose from most of the stumpy chimneys. "Nearly home," said Owen, with a note of relief in his voice. At least the house would be warm, and that would be a welcome sensation. The perspiration of the day had soaked his clothes, and it was cold under the evening wind. If Moore's chickens had provided a few extra eggs today, they might be able to trade for a jar of ale from the small tavern that served the village. It didn't often happen. The hens were as poorly fed as the family, but he could hope. Maybe he could. The thought of home comforts was interrupted by a low-pitched, blood-curdling growl. The hair on the back of Owen's neck stood on end, in a primitive reaction to the sound. He stopped in his tracks and looked around, noting that his brothers had also come to a halt. "What was?" Griff began, but Di nudged him with his elbow to silence him. Instinctively, the 3 brothers edged closer together, gripping their hoes protectively, raising them not as tools but as primitive weapons. They stood back to back, facing outward, as they searched their surroundings for the source of the threatening sound. It came again, louder this time, and with a deafening